Good morning, everyone. Today's feast of the Most Holy Trinity and next Sunday's feast of the Most Holy Body and Blood of Christ are doctrinal feasts. They are feasts that help us to delve more deeply into some truths of our faith and to really mine the treasure and the richness that is there for our spiritual lives. Many of us have childhood memories and sometimes painful memories of lining up at recess and having two captains pick us for their kickball or their flag football team. I don't think I was ever chosen last, but I know that I was never chosen first either. And then there were some nail-biting moments where I knew that I was close to last. No child ever wants to be chosen last, and even more so, no one wants to be left behind. It's funny, even when we get older, we still want to be chosen for recognition, for a job, for a friend, as a spouse. The desire to be chosen and the fear of not being chosen never really goes away. The first reading for today's feast invites us to think about who we are in light of who God is. It's a scene where Moses very eloquently reminds the ancient Israelites everything that God has done for them. Now remember, in ancient times, the gods of the people were immutable. They were far away, detached, unfeeling, uncaring. It was believed they wielded their power arbitrarily and for their own self-serving purposes. Human beings were simply their pawns in a big game of chess played by one false god against the other. But the experience of ancient Israel was different. The God who revealed himself to them was close to them, considerate of their needs and compassionate. And even though they were a small, tiny, weak nation, God chose them from among all the nations of the world to be his own people. The God of Israel took note of their suffering, their slavery in Egypt. He freed them with spectacular signs and wonders and gave them a land all their own. That's why Moses today, at the border of the Promised Land, reminds them that this was unheard of. It had never been done before, that God, any God, would accept a people, love them, and choose them. It was amazing in itself. God accepts, loves, and chooses us, not because of who we are or what we have done, not because of our successes or our achievements. God accepts, loves, and chooses us because of who God is. God's love for us is not based on whether we're good or bad, or whether we've succeeded or whether we've failed. It's based on the fact that God in his nature is good, merciful, and kind. That is extremely liberating for us because God's love is not conditional. It doesn't come and go, and we never have to doubt it. All of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we desire at the deepest levels of our heart to be accepted, loved, and chosen. The theologian Paul Tillich once delivered a sermon entitled, "You Are Accepted." And the point of it was to help his hearers accept their acceptance by God despite their feelings of unacceptability. And all of us fight those feelings every day. This is what he spoke. Do you know what it means to be struck by grace? We cannot transform our lives unless we allow them to be transformed by the stroke of grace. It happens or it does not happen. And certainly it does not happen if we try to force it upon ourselves, just as it shall not happen as long as we think in our self-complacency that we have no need of it. God's grace strikes us when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes us when year after year, the longed-for perfection of life does not appear. When the old compulsions reign within us as they have for decades, when despair destroys all joy and courage. Sometimes, at that moment, a shaft of light breaks into our darkness, and it's as though a voice were saying to us, "You are accepted. You are accepted. Accepted by that which is greater than you, and the name of which you do not know. Do not ask for the name now. Perhaps you will find it later. Do not try to do anything now. Perhaps later you will do much. Do not seek for anything. Do not perform anything. Do not intend anything. Simply accept the fact that you are accepted." If that happens, we experience grace. You see, God has already chosen you. And in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, we're told that God chose us before the foundation of the world. Imagine that. Before God created the sun, the moon, and the stars, or even a simple rock, God chose you and called you for some purpose. You weren't even born yet, and God chose you to create you so that you could love Him and be with Him for all eternity. Too much of our religion is focused on trying to choose God rather than relishing in God's choice of us. Too much of our spiritual life is spent trying to earn something that we can never earn and which God has already freely given. In the third edition of the Roman Missal, the book we use for our prayers at Mass, you'll hear the frequent use of the word merit. Now, I have to confess, it's something I don't particularly like just because it's used so often, but the problem is not with the word merit, it's that it can often be understood in our hearing. Merit is something that can come both before a gift and after a gift. When it comes before a gift, merit is thought of as something that you have to do to earn the gift. And that's probably the most common understanding of the word. But it's not how the church wants us to hear the word merit in our prayers and in the liturgy. The church wants us to understand that we have already received a great gift from God, His acceptance, His love, His forgiveness. But now we have to merit it. Or in other words, we have to live up to it. But nothing that we do can earn it. God freely gives it, but now our response is one of meriting it. It's an important distinction. One way of thinking of it, if we see ourselves as having to merit God's love for us, well, that kind of thinking will lead to scrupulosity, despair, and spiritual death. But if we understand merit as something, as a living up to a gift that God has already given and that He's already chosen us, well, that leads to spiritual health, vibrant faith, and joy. In the movie Saving Private Ryan, you might remember the scene near the end when a wounded Captain Miller calls Private Ryan over, and as he is dying, his last words to this young private, as they just were victorious in this battle and victory was now on the horizon, he tells this young private, "Earn this. Earn this." Of course, he was speaking of the sacrifices his unit made to bring Private Ryan home alive. God's acceptance and love have already been sealed for us on the cross of Jesus Christ. There is nothing that we could do to ever earn so great a gift, but our life now must be one of living up to it. You and I must live up to our being chosen, because we will always and forever be chosen by God. Long before you knew Him, God knew you and chose you to love Him. Rest in that truth today. Blessed are the people the Lord has chosen to make his own.